I think that today people are still getting used to what agentic AI means. And almost like there's like a parallel to like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where people were getting used to what AI means. Like one example from our customers is like they spend a lot of time processing loans. And so like in the beginning, you had the idea that people were like, oh, I can just click this button and it'll tell me like exactly what it is. Great. It saves me the trouble of having to like consume the stock. It'll go from like a minute per doc to like a second. That's great. But then the idea of the agentic future of it is they're like, well, wait a minute. Why even bother to make the person go open up each of those themselves when you could actually have the agent kind of go through the process and give the loan processor like a full summary of all of this in some structured way. So this to me is the evolution of the AI enterprises wanted, and then now taking the form of this specific approach of more agentic AI.
Today, I'm joined by Ben Kus, who's the CTO at Box. People probably know Box. They've been around for a while. They have almost 100,000 paying customers. They serve more than half of the Fortune 500. And today, like they're talking about their product suite as intelligent content management. For years, they've built just a great store for documents and all the unstructured data that businesses have. And they've made huge investments in generative AI over the past 2 years. Today, we get to go deep with Ben, hear his thoughts about what they've built, where they're going, especially with agents, how they set up their teams and some of their tech internally. And I think it's just a great conversation for anybody interested, especially in what it looks like to shift a business and a product suite to really make use of generative AI at scale. Box has really been a leader here. With that, we'll jump in and hear more from Ben. All right, welcome, Ben. I'm gonna let you tell everybody about yourself and why we're having this conversation today. I think for anyone who's not familiar with Box, we get to hear a bit about like just who you are, what you're working on, and then your role and what you bring to this conversation about generative AI.
Sure. So thanks for having me on. I'm Ben Kus. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Box. And amongst my other Box duties, I'm helping to lead our AI initiative, in particular around everything that goes into our AI platform, the technologies we choose, our agentic approach, and so on. So I've been at Box for about 10 years. Right around the time we went public, seeing us grow from like our initial IPO to now over $1 billion in revenue. We have over
That's awesome.
115,000 enterprise customers and tens of millions of users. And of course, our whole world is content. And so files are the things that make up the unstructured data in our lives, the ability to share, the ability to collaborate, the ability to work and create these things, in addition to understand them, find them, all of that stuff is sort of the things that Box does, in addition to use this content in a very productive way. And we have some new releases that we're really proud of.
No, that's awesome. And I hope we're going to get to hear more about those today. I mean, when we first talked more than a year ago now, but it sounds like, everything's continued. You all kind of had a product that was built to take advantage of generative AI and really do like step level changes and what you can, accomplish for your customers. But, you all have been pretty public about what you're up to. Like you mentioned, you've launched some things. Can you give us a sense of like, just where are you today? Like what is the strategy with generative AI? What have you launched so far and built? We get to just level set there, help people understand like what's the kind of value you've added or the things you've created that are helping customers already.
So our whole world is unstructured content. And so for many years, like well before generative AI, one of our goals was to use the latest of AI or machine learning to help people really gain these like insights into your data. Sometimes it's in the forms of like very practical things like search or like being able to kind of like, plus transcript some videos or like label images and so on. And then, but with generative AI, it's kind of had this whole new world of helping you like really treat unstructured data in a whole new way. Like, and I know many of us have lived through this, but there's this like interesting moment when you think back of like data today, if I use this word data, like data and databases or structured data, is like dramatically different from, certainly 20 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, probably 5 years ago, in that there's no end of systems, there's no end of great companies, there's no end of technologies that have helped us really evolve how we use data to the point like most companies, the way they use it is dramatically different. It's sort of the lifeblood of some companies. And so that's structured data. And that's how this evolution has kind of occurred. Now, in the world of unstructured data, it unfortunately had this huge challenge, which is that typically it took a person, like a human, to sit down and understand unstructured data. That was kind of almost its definition. And so like videos, PowerPoints, PDFs, like complicated Word doc, research documents, like contracts, like all these things, some of these are the most important aspects of like most companies. And frankly, it's the vast majority of data in most companies. And so this is the unstructured data. So 90% of most companies we talk to have unstructured data. So when generative AI came out, it was kind of like a gift. We were so like, we'd been watching the space develop. And then it was this kind of magical moment when all of a sudden it got really good. Like you kind of watched it like kind of have these like the emerging capabilities. You're like, wow, not only does this thing like chat well with you, which is of course one of the key things, it knows a lot, but it can actually, quote unquote, read or look through your content and then in almost like act like a personal assistant who just read the thing for you and is really smart. And then you can talk to it. Hey, I want to pull this out. I'm interested. Can you analyze this topic for me? Can you help me summarize this? Can you find this fact? And so on and so on. And so like this, I mean, it certainly wasn't possible a few years ago before generative AI. And now it's not only possible, but it's just almost getting better constantly. So with this kind of great new technology, one of the things that we do at Box is that we build in these AI capabilities to help you just directly in the product everywhere so that you can get these kind of capabilities. So one of our, I think last time we spoke, we had the ability to like, kind of go to a document and understand it. And then since then we've released a number of things, including the ability to go across the whole corpus of data and ask a question and the AI will kind of look through it all and like figure out how to best answer your question. We use like, the technology approaches like retrieval augmented generation, powered by vector databases, embeddings, and so on. In addition to some capabilities that we have around what we call structuring the unstructured data or metadata extraction, where the AI can go in and like say, like although the unstructured document, like a contract is very authoritative and it's like critical, we also want to marry it with the kinds of things that you might search for, or you might like filter on, like the contract details, like how much is this contract, who's the vendor, what's the effective date, when does it stop, and so on and so on and so on. And so those kind of things are metadata extraction, and that's also now built into our product, powered by the same sort of AI capabilities.
Yeah. So now you can just tag your whole corpus of unstructured documents and know what they're all about and use them elsewhere. And so like, that what you're describing makes sense. I think, is the place to get started, kind of the most, I'm guessing, basic entity in your world, rag chat with this document. And then you've kind of expanded to, a set of documents. And at some point, I'm sure this starts to just like, you're getting beyond context windows, you're cycling through lots of things. Like we talked recently about agents being a big part of the strategy in 2025. Clearly a hot topic, right? So like everyone's, OpenAI just launched Operator. They launched the deep research mode for pro users. Like this is on people's minds. Tell us, like, what does that even mean to you, first of all? Like when you think about agents at Box and the evolution in your AI strategy, like what's different versus what you've been doing today? And maybe let's just start there and like we can dig in a little bit. Love to hear more about how you're thinking about, agents in the future.
Yeah, to the point you alluded to, like it is quite interesting how quickly AI agents have captured sort of the imagination of really like the whole industry. I remember like there was almost this joke of like not that long ago where we would say talk to customers about agents and then they'd be like, whoa, okay, like this agentic thing you're talking about sounds crazy and futuristic, even to the point where
any enterprise customer you talked about this a year ago, it sounded horrible. Like this is going to just go on its own mission. You can't trust it. It hallucinates one time. What if it hallucinates a bunch of times? Like it shifted fast.
And to the point where like it used to be like a lot of people were like, well, I'm just trying to get my first use case. You're telling me about like some crazy new thing. But now it's like, I think that the thing that is really powerful about the concept of AI agents and how most people talk about it is that they're able to do sort of more complex tasks in a more sort of specific way than was possible up until now with most of the ways that people used AI. Like even to the basic, like, like the chat interface, like there's only so much you can do to basically tell it like, do this, do this, do this, do this in a way, like even for the more capable systems. And so, but if you have what I'll call an agentic workflow or an agentic routine, or like these kind of customized AI agents that have these goals, then suddenly you're able to do more complex tasks. And to me, there's a lot of different definitions of the AI agent we'll talk through, but like the idea of doing something that's more valuable and more complex is really why I think so many people are so interested in AI agents. They've kind of graduated from almost like an assistant who's like waiting to answer your question to like something that you can kind of say, go do this. And then either an agent or a team of agents like kind of go off and like kind of do these more complex tasks.
Yeah. And that's like, I was talking to somebody earlier today, like they're working on agents for coding, one of the big companies, and, they're having to explore all these new user experience aspects. If it is going to go do a complex task, like how do they get it to check in along the way, and how do they help a person understand the progress it's made, and how do you guide them? So I think there's a whole bunch of stuff to figure out. But conceptually, you just mentioned like some of the excitement, some of the value you could deliver for customers. Tell us more about like where are you on this journey? Is there are there practical applications that you have in mind or are working on? And clearly, whatever you can talk to, you don't need to tell us anything private, but curious where your head is on it.
Yeah. So for us, one of the important things is that we want to build and sort of think about everything we do from an agentic perspective. Like even when we're offering something like chatting with your documents or looking across a corpus of data. Like interestingly, like there's a way to do it that's sort of, oh, it's just basic retrieval augmented generation. You get the answer. There's these techniques that we have. But then there's like this concept of like agentic RAG or making an agentic routine to do these different sort of pieces of this flow. And when we use the word agentic is usually when the AI participates in helping to figure out the next best steps. So to give you an example, like there's if you ask AI, like just almost like a standard thing that most companies I ever talk to, they're like, AI works in this content, and then you're like, okay, I just want to ask a question of a document or summarize it, right? So this has been since the very beginning of generative AI. It's kind of always worked. But then there's this question of like, well, was it right? And you'll notice that like
Yep.
sometimes the AI, you can actually just like prompt it at the end and be like, hey, are you sure? And then like half the time I was like, well, okay, now that you said that, yeah. And then it gives you a really good answer. And so like what we learned kind of early on was like, not only can you have AI like check itself, but you can have AI like correct itself too. And so an example of something that was like a still asking question of document, but like a better results will be to have it like answer the question and then go another round and double check it, like almost like a person would do to like proofread. And then like, wow, okay, I'm gonna update this because it's not quite right. And then you find you get a lot better answers. And then this kind of like thought process continues along to like, one of the key things for all AI is to cite its sources. And so we have like a mechanism we had built to cite. But then it turns out like an agentic mechanism to cite is much better, where you basically tell the AI, why did you think this question, this answer in this document? And then the AI is like, well, let me pull out the sites now. And so it's got this like aspect of like having an intelligent step not in between all of these. And so these are examples of these little mini agentic flows. And so for us, step one is build and think that way so that our platform can evolve as the AI evolves. Like so that we don't get forced into like everything I just said, we could have programmed ourselves.
Yeah.
Function call one, function call two, function call three. And that was how we originally did it. But then
Yep.
the idea of building the agenticness into the platform, then you can provide the same functionality. Ask a question, document, get the answer, but have it done in a way that's easier for you to evolve. So across
Yeah.
all of these different functionality we would provide, Q&A and documents, metadata extraction, we found that like adding agentic steps along the way can really improve accuracy. And it used to be like maybe the AI wasn't good enough, so it struggled to sort of make these decisions. But these days, almost all the top models are good enough that it can actually, it is very much an intelligent arbiter of the work that you need to go forward, which is one of the sort of hallmarks of an agentic flow.
The way that you're describing that to me, if I'm hearing it right, it could leave you in a place where you're doing all the things you've already been doing. The AI features you ship to customers just stay what they are. And your customers don't necessarily need to think, oh, now I'm using an agent.
Yeah.
It's just a better outcome for the customer.
Well, I think that's part of it. Although I would think that one of the things we've noticed is that when people use the word AI agent, they often expect a slightly different user interface. And this is like almost like depending it's like a fun like hobby of mine to like ask people what is an AI agent compared to an AI model, right? And you get like a lot of like really good answers, but it's like they're different answers. And then one of them is that you think of the AI as an entity by which you're like that has like a personality and a goal. And this is not true for every agentic like application, but it's true of like many of them, so to the point where you kind of are like almost like feel like you're talking to an intelligent being as opposed to having some sort of computer do something for you. And that I think is actually like common in a lot of agentic systems. And it's one that we don't go out of our way to brand our AI to like have like a like it's not named. It's not like a like hi, my name is that kind of style. But it is something that has very much a goal, a purpose, an objective, and then that helps it then kind of like try to deduce the best way to interact with users, which is again an important part of any AI, but also any agentic AI.
There kind of is this expectation some people have that they want to talk to this intelligent being. You also mentioned that like you're weaving some of these agentic tactics into features you've already shipped. Like I guess like I'm just kind of curious, like with this moment in time, in 2025, when you're talking to enterprise buyers, people about their expectations, like what they want you to deliver in terms of outcomes for them, where do you think we are? Like what are you seeing as like, you know, the general set of expectations? How close are those to reality? Do you think like actually the technology in the market's way ahead of those expectations and like people haven't really caught up to what's possible yet? I'm just kind of curious what your reflection is on like the ability for people to digest and use this stuff.
It's a good question. So, like, I think that today, people are still getting used to what agentic AI means. And almost like there's like a parallel to like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where people were getting used to what AI means. And I think what helped a lot was that like the world kind of standardized on like, this is a chat interface. This is what ChatGPT looks like. This is what when you log into Gemini or Anthropic or any of these wonderful like kind of solutions, they all kind of all look the same and they all act kind of the same. And so you got used to like, oh, that's what AI, that's what it is. But then it turns out that that kind of interface and that kind of approach is fairly limited. Well, one of the key things is like you like really giving enough time to kind of think, which I think is one of the other major aspects of being agentic. I think that there's a lot of great uses even now that enterprises are adopting, but some of them in the early days they have projected the like, what if it could do this big sort of complex set of tasks, and in many cases, like when confronted with like some of these like more assistant type AI, like they were like, well, this helps my users, which is great. Like this is one of the big benefits of AI across almost any product. But then, but can it really like sort of like make it faster to do this work? Like one example from our customers is like they spend a lot of time, they were like processing loans. And so they would spend a lot of time like, you take a loan and then they're like, well, prove who you are, upgrade, like either phone bill or like your latest whatever. And you send all these docs. And then historically somebody had to go and read through it and like circle the little part and be like, is this from the policies? Is it one of these in the last month and so on? And so like in the beginning, you had the idea that people were like, oh, I can just, click this button and then it'll on this document, it'll tell me like exactly what it is. Great. It saves me the trouble of having to like consume this doc. It'll go from like 2 seconds or like, a minute per doc to like a second. That's great. And then,
Yep.
but then the idea of the agentic future of it is they're like, well, wait a minute. Why even bother to make the person go open up each of those themselves when you could actually have the agent kind of go through the process and give the loan processor like a full summary of all of this in some structured way. And so this to me is the evolution of the AI, what enterprises wanted, and then now taking the form of this like this specific approach of like more agentic AI.
Yeah.
And
It's like
and
the thing they always wanted is like now possible.
yes, and there was an interesting thing, which is that like depending on like sort of how you follow the research and the sort of the world, like this is not the last 3 months or 6 months was not the first time that like somebody thought of the way that AI should work is to like cycle. But in the early days, there wasn't as much sort of understanding on how to like make AI sort of reflect on itself and be able to generate these kind of complex tasks. And so and any enterprise who was experimenting themselves and talked to a lot of them, and they would highlight how sometimes it worked really well, but then sometimes it would kind of like be really weird results. And sort of one of the underlying aspects of that is AI is naturally a little bit generative AI is naturally a little bit non-deterministic, right? You get a slightly different answer in some cases, and so and a hallmark of agentic AI is that it like repeatedly tries. And so there's this almost like accumulation of error. And so sometimes you would like, you try this thing, it works 5 times. And then sometimes it really gives you very bizarre results. And that really kept people away from any sort of production class, enterprise grade requirements until those kind of things were solved. And then I think now in the industry, we're starting to solve all those. And then now people are kind of looking at this again and saying, how can I use this to go forward?
What has to change in the product for people? Like, if you were to surface that ability for people today, would they know they could do it? How do you think about the evolution of these product experiences or the UX to help people see what's possible?
Yeah. So I think there's in our world at Box, part of our mission is to make sure that everything you do in content is just super easy, right? Like, and so, again, you log in, you got a complex document, just click the button, it'll answer any question you want, it'll summarize, it'll help you find data in our hubs and so on. And that is a common use case, and it's one that we provide our customers. And we just consider that to be like all content solutions should have that going forward, no doubt. Now, there's a slightly different sort of mental model when you're thinking about a complex business process, in that there's oftentimes in enterprises like these owners of this business process. So they say like, my job is to do this thing, maybe the loan processor piece, or maybe a company that handles like accidents, like, insurance, or companies that handle like, processing, these major financial transactions with all this due diligence that goes into it, or really anything, like even something to like, maybe I'm in sales and there's like an RFP that like I need to respond to. Like each of these are like tasks that have like a decently large amount of specific business value. And a lot of times there's like a way you do it internally. First, I do this, and then I review it with this person, and then they double check these things, and then they get approval from this person. And those kind of workflows are usually the people who are kind of thinking about this and owning that workflow and owning that sort of task in these organizations. Some of these are like kind of back office, some of these are working with customers, some of these are in different parts of like sort of the internal organization. They are the ones who are like, know very well, like, I want AI to help me here because this is the worst part for my employees, or this is a part that takes so long for our customers. And then they're the ones who are able to then work and say like how to think about how to incorporate the agenticness or even just AI in general into the process. So we usually work with those kind of people when we're talking about the more sort of complex business workflows.
Yeah. And that kind of like, I mean, that's taking you in a very different direction potentially. Me as an outsider just looking in, like, hey, this is a store for all my unstructured data, to this is now a thing that helps me get my workflows done. Maybe like to, because I think a lot of listeners of the show also want to hear about kind of how you're doing it, but a closing thought on this part of it, like what's Box look like in a year? Or, what's your prediction for, what feels different for customers by the end of 2025? It'd be fascinating to hear how you're thinking about the way AI is changing things for the company.
We do intelligent content management. And so that's not just, there's a lot of things in there that's like, like you would consider to be traditional for all employees. Like I got to collaborate. I got to be able to send things externally, internally. I got to keep it very secure. I got to send all my governance policies and all that stuff. But then there's the world of like effectively utilizing that content for really valuable business purposes. And so we've released recently something that we call our Enterprise Advanced Suite. And we have a different set of products, including some workflow products, some capabilities to like generate documents, some capabilities to like incorporate forms. And we have this capability we call Box Apps, and its job is to not only utilize just your content and all of your like content-oriented applications, but then also apply AI to them as you're able to then use them in these kind of more, I'd call it business-specific ways.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of how we've used in the future, is that files are now like almost with AI, you care less about the file, you care more about the system that like opens the files. Now with AI, it's so capable that it can kind of just do more, back to the sort of the basics of like, it doesn't matter if you have a Word doc or a PDF or anything else, you can just do more with these things. So in this world, we are concentrating more on the ways to bring extra value to people for all their content across the board in ways that are easy to use.
Yeah, that's awesome. I imagine exciting. Like you said, this was a huge gift. There's a totally new set of things that are possible today than there were before. So I think maybe to transition some, I'm fascinated by this idea. There's a lot of people we get to spend time with that are like AI native startups that everybody's just building from ground up. You all have been doing Box for a long time. You've got an established tech stack and a way of building. Like, I would love to hear you talk a bit about, like, as a leader, how you made this transition. Like, what did it look like to integrate these things into a really established platform? Just, lessons learned that others could benefit from. I'd be curious to hear what were the big moments in that journey.
I think like every different size company had like a different set of challenges when it came to AI. Like a brand new startup is almost like the easier version of this, because they got a chance to just completely focus on the new version of things. And I think very big companies sort of have these like giant initiatives across the board, and they had to kind of like get all of their different business units and all their product lines and all that stuff to kind of try to use AI. And then they had the challenge of, do I build it locally? Do I try to brand it centrally? And all these different things you see different companies like struggling with in different ways. So for us at Box, it was important for us to like almost start with the idea that we needed a consistent, highly secure, highly flexible way to do AI across the board. So we think of things in platforms. So we have a content platform. We added that to our content platform, our AI platform. And our AI platform had a bunch of the capabilities you'd associate with AI, like the ability to call a large language model, the ability to switch them, the ability to customize prompts, the ability to do retrieval augmented generation, the ability, like all these kind of techniques. And so we got that working. And then one of our goals was then to say, what is the best way to use this both for individual products in addition to across the company. And so, like as an internal engineering team, this was kind of a challenge because you go to a team and they would say like, "Well, I've got all this other stuff to do, and I'm not sure how AI would fit in." Like, and then then they hadn't spent all their time with AI like other parts of the company has. So there became this like moment where there's like I have a suggestion or I want to sort of almost ask or part of this AI initiative for you to build this piece. Probably every single product team everywhere has a lot to do, right? And so then,
Yep.
and if there's like a new thing that's like completely different from what they saw before, they would have to be able to go and solve it. So just to give an example, we have a notes product, right? It's this we've had it for 10 plus years. It's this note taking tool. It's called Box Notes, and it actually can benefit directly, very like in a lot of different ways from incorporating AI. And so then one thing we had to do is work closely with the notes team who is not necessarily like spent all their time with AI to say like, hey, it can generate content for you. It can correct things. It can help the process of content creation in addition to just answering questions about the document. And so that was sort of like an internal like they're like, well, like is an AI person in charge of this? Do we have special product people who are AI people, or is it the notes team who thinks about is it an AI feature and notes is there, or is it a notes feature and AI is there? All those kind of questions across every product line we have, probably for every other company too, has this kind of concern, which is like, what do you focus on? And
Totally.
organizationally, there's always this like how you layer the responsibilities in, and then different. I don't think there's any one answer that fits everybody, but that's just a challenge of like you kind of have to deal with every time you have these like generic capabilities that come out that are very powerful and could potentially disrupt any product. At the same time, don't apply AI to something that's not really useful for, and then in which case you don't need it.
Yeah. And that's like, I mean, there's always on the other side of the learnings, people say those things, right? Like, this is just another tool. Make sure it's the right tool for the job, that it actually delivers value for customers. I'm curious, like, I'm sure there was hard lessons learned along the way. I'm sure you all have kind of settled out at some things that worked. Like, are there, an example or two of each you could share with us?
So I'd say from a technology side, the thing that I would definitely do again is the solidifying sort of like the world of how AI works in your product. Like, so we're content oriented. AI has to be able to go in and read files and do it in a consistent way. It needs to be able to use different like large language models. We built something we call AI Studio, which is the ability for you to modify these things. So get that like do that very well up front, because the more that all of your teams are using, OpenAI or some other AI model in different ways, the more that it's going to be hard for you to guarantee, like especially for enterprise audience, that the way that it works is meets all of their needs from a sort of security and compliance and sort of contractual obligations, which is very important to us overall. And then the to me then the thing that you don't want to do that we had done a little bit was just tell everybody in the company you have to think about AI and do something with AI. Like that early days, it was I think a lot of companies did this. They're like, AI is so different. Like everybody just do AI. And then you see
Oh, I
that
heard about a
like,
ton of these. It was like, stop everything for 2 weeks. We're going to
yeah,
have every feature team in the
yeah.
company go build a prototype.
And I mean, there's versions that I think work well, like hackathons and things, but like to tell somebody they have to use AI, it's the wrong message, I think. Like, I think AI is a technology and therefore is a way to accomplish something new. So therefore it's like you need to find your problem before you find the solution. Now, the difference though is that it's so different and so new and so capable that people
Totally.
before didn't really like it's like a natural like product and engineering person's like they kind of have a sense of what's possible and they don't bother to think about non-possible things or impossible things. But now it changed. And then so you have to get them to think about this. Well, but if you just tell them you have to do AI, then you get a lot of people doing AI, even if it's not that valuable. And that was one of the things that we put in early, which was to say every AI feature that we're under evaluation is try to describe why this feature is valuable, but don't use the word AI. And if it sounded not interesting, like then don't do it. We just kind of wanted to avoid the over indexing on AI, which then we've been doing AI for a long time. We know that it comes in these waves, and so you don't want the inevitable thing where if you built something that wasn't quite useful, but just it detracts from the overall mission, which is to be like an intelligent, sort of like background foundation to your product.
I think that's definitely the risk. A lot of AI cruft. There's a lot of purple sparkly buttons, in
Yeah.
products around. I think there's also like, I mean, you kind of said something that I think is intention. I'm curious how you think about it. Like, one of the most valuable things you did was put the ability to like iterate on prompts and try different new models in front of your teams and make that accessible to people. And like, I think when I've talked to some leaders, they've given like the bull case on kind of what you just described of asking everybody to go build something, which is essentially this is like a whole new building material. I think a lot of people know how like normal software works, and then if they haven't lived in the world of like prompt engineering, actually gotten a feel for how these models behave and started to figure out, okay, how do you test them? How do you evaluate them? Then it can feel overwhelming and they don't want to get started. And they don't even see the opportunity to like solve a problem in a better way. And like, I think that's the tension, but how do you think about that tension? How have you navigated it with your teams? What guidance do you give them?
I mean, to go back, like I think we're actually, although we can talk about the history of AI, how we kind of got here, I think we're actually in this situation right now because not everybody, including engineers who worked on AI, actually understand all the intricacies of agentic AI. It's different when you let AI think for a while. And like the user interface is different. The way that the user expectation is different. The what's possible is actually weirdly different. And so this idea of the like system two thinking of the AI or like giving it time to reflect and so on, like it really opens up a lot of possibilities. So one of the things that we were trying to do is learn from our previous lessons. So don't just say to the whole company, everybody use agentic AI. Like instead you say like, you kind of get some people together, maybe some of the team members, product or engineering or whatever, and you start to talk about the kind of possibilities. Like, and so we have these like internal strategy, technology, architecture, sort of early stuff, like even before we've quite figured it out. Yeah. And then we ask people like, what might be interesting, and then maybe there's 10 ideas, 4 are really good, and then you say, okay, well, can we sort of work together, people from all these different teams like coming together to say, let's try that one. And those people who are sort of more comfortable in that mode are the kind of where we focus our efforts, and even onto the process wise of like we do a variant of the design sprints from Google, a 5-day design
Yeah.
sprint. So like just so like sit down, try stuff, talk about it, because I do believe that the normal cycle of development that we've all learned for the last 10 to 20 years doesn't work well when things are changing so fast, like with AI or agentic AI and so on. There's just too much, like you change your mind a lot more, and it gets in the way of like, wait a minute, 3 weeks ago you told me these were the requirements. And you're like, well, yeah, that's just completely different now. And then that's the kind of thing you need to adjust for.
Yeah. That was one of the bits of advice that I think it was Sam Altman gave at the OpenAI Dev Day this past year. It was like, build for a world that the models can't actually deliver on yet. Because by the time you get there, it'll already be possible, right? Like it's changing that fast. No, that's cool to hear how you all just like, that's like org structure and approach. You talked a little bit about tech stack, but you built some of these things into your platform. I guess you kind of talked about, where did you start? What was the platform you built initially? I'm especially curious, like what you all have learned in terms of like, valuable platform things that you deliver to your team. Like what are the elements that, you figured out how to solve at a technology level that help people go faster? Curious what that looks like today.
From the stack perspective, we operate on very high scale, right? Like trillions of these files, and like we know that to deliver them on that kind of thing, especially securely, and it requires expertise. So we had a specific team dedicated to focusing on these underlying pieces. And usually in the beginning, especially when we're experimenting, we just pick a technology that seems to work well, that meets our general needs. So, for instance, when we first built our retrieval augmented generation system, we used a variant of the same database we used for search, which is, of course, we have a giant search system. Because we found that if we had actually sat down to say, let's do a full analysis of all of the vector databases in the world and select the best one, then like that's going to take a while, like to do all the tests and so on. And so we didn't have that luxury at that time. And so this is something that we are like starting down the path of building. But it's interesting. Like normally when you pick a technology in a like a SaaS company, you don't try to replace it anytime soon. It's kind of like the cost of migration is almost like so big that it's usually better stick with what you have. But with AI, we're actually more rapidly reevaluating. We don't always change, but like our agentic framework, our vector database, the way that we do our embeddings models, the way which large language models and how we support them and so on, like all of that is like very rapidly changing in a way to basically try to keep up. Because if you, this is the corollary is that if you picked a solution early on, it might not be the best solution anymore. So it's a bit of an architecture and an engineering challenge because you're kind of like, people love to use analogy, but like in flight changing things as you go through it, which is a little bit how we think about it. But then
But
in terms
you've
of,
engineered for that possibility, right? It's like that's a good thing to plan ahead for and say we need to be able to change quickly.
I guess the advice I'd give to anybody is to like you like if you're not careful, you spend too long engineering to change things. So don't engineer against it. Don't ever get to the point where you're like hey, this in this decision I can't change. Like spend a little bit more time on that one. And then internally, once you have that, you get the experts to build this like kind of solid, secure foundation. Then you need to interestingly find like this is one thing I always have to remind myself is like you have to find a way to pitch it to the internal teams in the appropriate level of abstraction because these are engineers. And so like many times they're like, I don't understand. I see I can go to like, any of these tools online. I can go to OpenAI, I can use their playground. And in some cases, we're like, no, I want you to use the way that we sort of a higher level abstraction that we've solved for you. And sometimes there's like a little bit of a potential, like, I mean, naturally people like want, to see the underlying bits and pieces of how the engine works. And so we early on, and I would advise everybody to do this, like when you say, I know what I'm going to do for this platform, I know how I'm going to use it internally, double check with your quote unquote customers, meaning your internal developer teams. Because a lot of times they have some insight. They're like, well, I need it to work like this. And you're like, oh, like if I had not realized that, I would have actually spent, I would have to change something or it wouldn't work for them and they'd have to do it outside of the platform. So to me, it's like whenever you build a platform, never forget that platform has customers and then that the value of that platform needs to be like better than their alternatives. And so like, just almost like standard product management, but sometimes you forget because your internal customers are quite important is to be able to check with them and to get product people to evaluate whether or not get the early adopters to go and figure out these things. This was a key lesson that we learned and we have to constantly remind ourselves about doing that, especially as we consider things like, the next generation of agentic routines.
No, that's cool. And I mean, I can imagine the complexity starts to explode. I mean, we're seeing it with all of our customers, especially as like, you talked about elements of a platform that were like, cool, we want to be able to swap models, we want to be able to manage prompts, we want to be able to like, you know, swap out embedding systems or like the aspects of your RAG database. Like those are like the foundations. How have you all approached quality? Like what is your story around how in these different features you're building and delivering in the Box app or delivering on a customer expectation and like doing the right thing? Curious what parts of the platform solve for that.
In the early day, so one of the challenges that an enterprise company like Box has is like we don't have the benefit of being able to see the data. It's strictly like it's not our data. And the whole premise of like when an enterprise, these are regulated, very sensitive info that they trust us with, is like we have to have very strict controls. Nobody looks at that data. It's not our data, right? And that's just different from say, maybe like a startup that like like people upload things and they're engineers. They look at it like and so in a terms of service, like kind of like maybe don't reflect the sort of enterprise grade standard. So we have really strict rules internally for everything, including AI, and like contractual guarantees and compliance standards and audits and so on and so on. So, but this puts a big burden on us because it's like we don't quite know. We can't look at the question. We can't look at the answer. We can't look at what's happening. Even if customers give us feedback, there's like we can't like we don't want them to send us their sensitive data.
You don't
like,
know what the feedback's against. Yeah.
So early on, we did this technique, which is I think these days is built into many systems. It's called like LLM as a grader, where like we actually ask a large language model to evaluate the answer. And again, this was our first agentic like step, even before we called it agentic, which was like, and then in that case, like it would tell you like, that wasn't quite what they wanted. And because it's funny is like if you give somebody a question, it's like easier for them to evaluate if you give them a question and the answer, right? And then usually we use like the different model so that it could like not suffer from the same challenge. So we have an ongoing like run rate where we have an AI tell us, 87, or I think we're up to like that was the early days. Like I think we're up to like 96% of the AI believes we're good at 96% of these things like that come out. So that's one way that we do quality. Now, if you ask me, what are those 4%? I don't know. Like that, this is the kind of world we have to actually we glean it from we have these eval tests so that we have our skills get measured, our like kind of example questions, example answers across documents, which we evaluate. This is really critical for us. Whenever a new model comes out, we run these tests to say how good is it for our use cases.
Right.
In addition to the
all data that you can see, like curated stuff.
Yeah. No, this is either for the most part it's data that we have collected that is as our data, as opposed to we can't use customer data. Like we don't even ask. Like it's just It's just not our sort of mentality. And then but then you've learned like in your tests and things that our QA people, our internal people, like these are the kind of questions that throw things off, and then you just add those to the test suites and add sort of representative documents of that. And so then when something new comes out, you see how well it does. And this is really important in like metadata extraction, where we have to be able to like kind of like know there typically is a ground truth on like making sure like what's the effect of today's contract is like an answerable question that has a specific version. So we build these kind of like every one of our features, we build these like evaluation capabilities. So like the grader plus the eval suites plus just like we do get a chance to talk to customers. That's nice. And then they tell us how they send us like, oh, this is so great, or hey, this one didn't work out. In which case we can then sort of respond to the specifics of that moment.
Oh, that's cool. And that whole discipline, I mean, this is stuff we live in, do all day. Like we have certainly found it takes some time for people to learn, how to do LLM as a judge, even like what criteria that they want to grade something on. Like it's not always intuitive at first
Yeah.
how to structure that.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've had to tackle, like scaling across the organization, helping people learn how to do those things? Like how have you approached that knowledge?
For me, this used to be one of the like all prompt engineering a while ago was hard. Like you figured out that like at some point, if you like put a period in, it changed the quality answers dramatically. And then same with the graders. Like depending how you phrase what you wanted, it kind of gave you really different. Like depend the question you asked. You're like, we're at 99.9%. This is awesome. Versus we're at like 60%. Like I will say that lately, most models, the good ones, the like sort of the state of the art ones from almost any of these vendors, like the top ones, they've gotten very good at this. Like you don't have to spend as much time like massaging the prompt. They kind of just intuit. They're like, I know what you're looking for, and I'm going to tell you the answer. And usually, like as we used to do a lot more, where we'd have like humans go through and like in our eval sets, if the AI said something was off, like as it graded the answer, we'd be like, well, let's check. And then these days we still periodically do it, but we do it a lot less because it's like sometimes we're like, this is wrong. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. The AI was right and the human was wrong. And then that's just so the AI has kind of like, I think, saturated this sort of kind of this use case that we're talking about. And that's great. And we're looking forward to like the ongoing like improvements in that area.
To the point about the models catching up and just doing what we all want them to. You're hitting a little bit on like, and I mean, I was taking this there too on skill sets and like things you've had to teach the team. Like I assume, most of your engineering team wasn't all building with LLMs 2 years ago. Any like, thoughts on like how you've thought about hiring and building those skill sets? I'm curious how you've, built that capacity across the organization and what else you might suggest other leaders to think about.
It is interesting. Like you like, I mean, nowadays, maybe you can have somebody who's been doing like generative AI for a couple of years, like a user of it. But it's new that nobody has a ton of experience. And so many times when you're hiring or when you're trying to find sort of people to sort of lead the next generation of something. And I'll highlight agentic AI is exactly the same way, is you need not you don't think of it as traditional skill set. Like, do you know databases? Do you know how to use like big data? Do you know, like, it's like, how do you approach problems in a way that will likely let you experiment with this kind of thing to get the best results? And at some point, if you need somebody who is sort of like more willing to try things and then fail on them and then just can keep going. There's this, and some people associate with small companies, but I think there's like some people don't like that. They think it's like they prefer to know what's right or wrong, like, and then do that. For us in the early days, we picked some key people in the company who were sort of at the right like seniority levels across the board, and they sort of formed this early team that was AI team. We also we had this like interesting situation with Aaron and I where we ended up hiring an intern at 3 a.m. on a Saturday because we really needed somebody to start on Monday, and we got these like inbound requests over the weekend, and we were like, we need to interview this person, and then we like sent him an email, and then he responded, and then we did an interview at like I think it was like 3 a.m. Pacific East Coast time, and like that was kind of thing that we were trying early because that person was like very sort of had the background we were looking for this kind of thing. Yeah. So these days, I'd say we need to continue down that path of being able to continue to explore because again, the world's continuing to change. But at some point, there's like challenges with AI, like systematizing it, productionalizing it, and then that gets to more of the normal sort of engineering challenges that anybody faces for any of these tools.
No, that's awesome. I know that we're running tight on time, and I know we're going to need to wrap. But maybe just one last question: like, if you were to think about a single piece of parting advice for other engineering or product leaders that are building in the SaaS space. You all have figured out a lot. Anything else you'd suggest people think about in 2025?
For AI in particular, it's a very interesting moment where it's, this is arguably one of the most talked about, hyped situations that you've ever been in your career, along with the most sort of disruptive technology that maybe has ever happened in the last, long amount of time. And so there's like this tendency to like learn about it, understand it, draw a conclusion, and say, I did it. Like, that there's like AI happened, and then now here's the answer. But like my advice is if you have to be careful, because the things that the underlying aspects of the AI models are changing rapidly. Like reasoning models are changing rapidly. Like just even the cost, the speed, the way that these things work are changing rapidly. And if you're not careful, you'll have outdated conclusions quite rapidly.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's one of the things that I've spoken to a lot of groups where they're saying, especially for product people that aren't as maybe hands-on as some engineers have been early on here, what do we do? How do we learn? And the answer is always get hands-on and like stay hands-on, use these tools. Well, that's awesome. I know you're gonna have to run. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it. And look forward to the next time. Have a great day.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. That's all we have for today's episode of Deployed, the AI product podcast. I'm Ian Cairns, CEO and co-founder of Freeplay. I hope you enjoyed listening. And if you did, we'd love to hear about it. Your reviews mean a lot. They help other listeners. So give us a like, share, subscribe, wherever you're listening to this. And if something stood out to you in the episode, or if you've got feedback or ideas for a future episode, or if you simply just want to learn more we're up to at Freeplay, shoot me a note. I'm Ian at freeplay.ai. You can also find me on Twitter @Cairns. Thanks so much for listening.